Hello everyone, welcome back at my next video on my YouTube channel or any other platforms where I'm posting these videos. And this time, as I promised to you a longer time ago, demographics, or the people of Egypt or population in Egypt. And that's quite like a longer topic a little bit, because there is actually it includes everything, the language, the ethnic groups, and a lot of other stuff. So let's start with demographics. Egypt is the most populated country in the Arab world and the third most populous in African continent, with about, as I mentioned before, actually they estimate around 107 to 110, 111 million people living in Egypt, Egyptians, and population grew rapidly. These numbers are really huge from 1970 to 2010 due to medical advances and increases in agricultural productivity. So actually, because of the medicine, because of all the advances of modern technology, Egyptian population rapidly grew. What is interesting is Egypt population was estimated only at 3 million when Napoleon invaded the country in 1798. So imagine just 200 years ago, or 250 years ago. As in many other places of the world, basically these numbers were so low. Egypt's people are highly urbanized. Now, basically, as we mentioned before, the density of the population is mostly at the Nile Valley and in the delta of the river Nile, being concentrated along the Nile, notably Cairo and Alexandria in the delta and near the Suez Canal. Egyptians are divided demographically into two, and those who live in major urban centers, they called felarin, or farmers, and they reside in rural areas, and it's actually still around 50% of the population. And this total inhabited area constitutes a really huge part, something like 77,000 square kilometers, and it's similar. This density of the population on this part, in the delta, in the Nile Valley, similar to Bangladesh, or the country of Bangladesh. What is interesting about Egypt, basically, is that it's quite homogeneous group whose dominant physical characteristics are the result of the admixture of the indigenous African population with those of Arab ancestry. They are Egyptians, 98% are Egyptians, but basically it has these development stages, and it's quite homogeneous. So again, I try to actually really express it many times, but they are not Arabs. They were invaded and then they mixed with Arabs. But basically, still, the dominant group are Egyptians, ethnically and originally. Within urban areas, the northern delta towns, especially foreign invaders and immigrants came, and especially Persians, Romans, Greeks, Crusaders, Turks, and Circassians long ago left behind a more heterogeneous mixture of physical types. So Egypt was invaded and actually re-invaded, and then again made again more Egyptian many times in history. So that's why here you can find a really mixture of different skin colors and different people. Blonde and red hair, blue eyes, and lighter complexions are more common there than in the rural areas of the delta. So actually from Cairo to the north and the northern coast has sometimes people really white complexion with blue eyes. And these peasants, agriculturalists along the delta, along the Nile River and valley, are fellahin, or the classic peasant and Egyptian people. And of course, they have been affected also by intermarriage with outside groups, but still they are darker and they are this classic Egyptian people. Ethnic composition, we can say around 2000, is that there are predominantly 98% of Egyptians, then many Egyptian Arabs, so they are really mixed in families, Sudanese Arabs, then Arabized Berbers. Berbers are these nomadic people, Bedouin, and then some Rom population, but basically it's still dominant group are Egyptians. Well, there are many like other groups, like they call them Upper Egyptians, Lower Egyptians. Upper Egyptians are all the people from Cairo to the south and down to Nubia. And ethnically, they are quite similar to Lower Egyptians who are born from in Cairo, Giza, and Alexandria, and those parts of the country. In the extreme southern valley, Nubians differ culturally and ethnically from other Egyptians. Nubians are very dark complexioned people with dark eyes, dark hair, very, actually more African types. And they are coming from Nubia, which was actually in the past, in prehistoric past, part of Sudan and other before these empires. Their kinship structure goes beyond lineage. They are divided into clans and broader segments, whereas among other Egyptians of the valley and of Lower Egypt, only known members of the lineage are recognized as kin. So Nubians have mixed and intermarried members, particularly with Arabs, and a dominant physical characteristics tend to be those of sub-Saharan Africa. So basically, yes, there are these darker and sub-Saharians more than Lower Egyptians and Upper Egyptians. Well, then we have Bedouins, which are specific groups. So you can also recognize them a little bit, but Bedouins can be really, especially on Sinai Peninsula, white complexion with blue eyes, and they are Bedouins. So Bedouins are a social organization as a tribal, each group conceiving of itself as being united by a bond of blood and as having descended from a common ancestor. So there are many clans, many groups of Bedouins, and then they know actually each other, or they know that these Bedouins is from this clan and that clan. So they still keep this kind of very traditional bond of blood culture, we can say. Originally tent dwellers and nomadic herders, many have become semi-nomads or even totally sedentary, as in the northern Sinai Peninsula. Egyptian government actually built for them really like houses and a lot of like sort of chalets, but they usually, many of them, some of them they started to be sedentary and they are more modern, but many of them actually still live this nomadic and moving lifestyle, and they don't want to actually sit somewhere in some apartment or a house. So they still actually live in a kind of tents which they can move easily with their herds of sometimes horses and many times just camels. Then there are actually, for instance, the southern section of the eastern desert is inhabited by the Beja, who bear a distinct resemblance to the surviving depictions of pre-dynastic Egyptians. So you can see here people, especially in desert, which are very, very much similar to pre-dynastic Egyptians. The Egyptian Beja are divided into tribes, Abadan and Bisharin, and again it's sort of a blood lineage, and they actually know each other as the clans. So that's very interesting that in Egypt you can really find top proper ancestors of pre-dynastic Egyptians, which are actually pre-pharaonic, very, very ancient ethnic groups of Egyptians. Then, of course, there is a Western desert, and Western desert, there are a lot of Berbers, but Berbers are mixed Arab and Memezic descent. So again, it's not really Arabic people, but they are mixed. And, well, I think we can actually end with this, that what is interesting that in 1920s, which was a peak period when the number of foreigners in Egypt exceeded a lot of people, because in 1920s, the Egypt was not so hugely populated. It was more than 200,000 people living here. The largest as foreigners, the largest community being the Greeks, followed by the Italians, British, and French. Since Egypt's independence, the size of the foreign communities has been greatly reduced. Again, but it's coming because they have a lot of refugees, and they have a lot of also foreigners from other countries, from Europe, America, and from all around the world. Of course, they have a lot of foreigners still. But in that period of time, when Egypt was still under the colonial rule and power, the foreigners were really in huge numbers. Languages of Egypt, the official language, as I mentioned, is Arabic, and most Egyptians speak one of several vernacular dialects of that language. So there exists Egyptian Arabic, so it means that they speak a sort of vernacular, which is basic Arabic, but with a lot of twists and nuances of the language and vernaculars, dialects. And of course, it is a little bit different from Lower Egypt into Upper Egypt. As in the case in other Arab countries, the spoken vernacular differs greatly from the literary language. Literally, classic Arabic is in books, is in news, of course, but they speak a sort of dialect like in any other country. Modern literary Arabic, often called modern standard Arabic or Al-Fusha, clear Arabic, which developed out of classical or medieval Arabic, is learned only in school and is in the lingua franca of educated persons throughout the Arab world. So in books, and educated people, scientists and doctors, they really speak this lingua franca, or if not speaking, so writing in the style. Alongside the written language, there exist various regional vernaculars and dialects of Arabic, and these are termed collectively Al-Amiya, or Common Arabic. So, of course, and they have some certain level of differences and distinguishes inside of that classic Arabic. And of course, especially Egyptian Arabic was sort of directly influenced and a little bit mixed with some words, especially of modern origin, from English and French, and especially because of occupation. So sometimes they use some very English or very French word even in the Arabic speech or narrative, which is okay. That's this influence of these languages. Then we have, of course, some Berber languages of the Afro-Asiatic family and a Nilo-Saharan language family, which actually contains some Cushitic features. So these linguistic groups are also sort of present here, but of course they are in minority. Then, of course, at the time of the Islamic conquest, because Arabs and Islam actually came to Egypt, they really conquered them. The Coptic language, a later incarnation of the ancient Egyptian language, so from hieroglyphs and how the pharaohs were speaking, was the medium of the both religious and everyday life for the mass of the population. So basically, after Arab Islamic conquest, after Arab came, then people started slowly speaking Arabic with sort of like mixture, but the language before, actually sort of 10, 11, 12th century, and a domini was basically Coptic language. By the 12th century, however, Arabic had come into common use even among Christian Copts, whose former tongue continued only as a liturgical language of the Coptic Orthodox Church. So when you want to listen to classic Coptic language, which was the first language, which was coming, and I think 6 letters were preserved from the hieroglyphs, when you would like to listen to this language, there are YouTube videos. And you can listen to this language as a liturgical language, something like Latin in a church and in Coptic Orthodox churches and at these masses. Yeah, so this is very interesting. So this language is preserved. You can actually even study it. I think some schools really introduced it, and you can study that. But that language is sort of Latin, yeah, sort of used only for liturgical and these church processes and this sort of. And when we talk about religion, Islam is the official religion of Egypt, and nearly all Egyptian Muslims adhere to its Sunni branch. So Egyptians are Sunnis, not Shia as other Arab countries. The country has long been a center of Islamic scholarship, and Al-Azhar University, located in Cairo, is widely considered the world's preeminent institution of Islamic learning. Of course, then there were other branches, and you can actually dig deeper into that. But basically, I would like to focus not only on Islamic Egypt, or basically that religion. We know that 90% of actually Egyptians are Muslims. Muslim values was founded in Egypt in 1928. Sufism is also widely practiced, so even Sufis and Sunnis, these branches are practiced in Egypt. Religiously, as I said, I have the numbers around 85-90% of Egyptians, 90% of Egyptians are basically Muslims, but Orthodox Christians or Coptic Christians, well, these numbers are a little bit different from different sources, but around 14 to 15% of Egyptians are Coptic Christians. And of course, then, like now in modern surveys, a lot of people even are non-religious, or especially young people. they start to actually be much more modern, and they don't keep that religion really so strictly. And non-religious or other religions are around 2%, and this 2%, I think it's considered Jewish population and other population, especially non-religious from foreign countries which are residing in Egypt. So basically, these are also taken into statistics, especially from 2000, and now I'm checking 2015, and yes, then they say just the Christianity is around 15%, and then the rest is basically Muslim population. Copts are far and away the largest Christian denomination in the country in language, dress, and way of life. They are basically sort of like modern Muslims, but their church ritual and traditions, however, date from before the Arab conquest in the 7th century. Ever since it broke with the Eastern Church in the 5th century, the Coptic Orthodox Church has maintained its autonomy, and its beliefs and ritual have remained basically unchanged. So it's very specific branch or part of Christianity, because Coptic Christians you can find only in Egypt. They have a specific head of the church and specific rituals, specific beliefs, a little bit. Basically, they have a little bit different churches. You can check it out. The cross is more or less like a Maltese cross, a little bit. So yes, it's a little bit different from Catholics or evangelical churches in Europe, but basically the beliefs are based on the tradition of Christians. The Copts have traditionally been associated with certain handicrafts and trades, and above all with accountancy, banking, commerce, and the civil service. There are, however, also rural communities of Coptic Christians. So when actually we are talking about Coptic Christians, they usually keep certain professions, so accountants, teaching, banking, commerce, or so sort of they were, we can say, a little bit more educated. Nowadays, of course, like it doesn't really matter much, but in the past they kept these professions. Well, you can find 1/4 of the total Coptic population in Cairo. And then, of course, in villages, Coptic Muslim villages, Copts are actually in the middle of the Nile, or you can find them anywhere, but the highest concentration is in Cairo or in Alexandria. Well, I think that I would actually end this time, because the population is rather complicated here, but not like complicated. I would say that it's basically very interesting, because you can really find Egyptians of different colors, different eye colors of anywhere, and you can have really very dark Nubian people here and very light, almost Greek origin in Alexandria or in Cairo. So I would actually close it with this, that it's a very diverse country, but ethnically and originally 98% are Egyptians. Thank you very much. See you next time.